Hey guys, so nice to see you all. So happy you could come. Welcome to another one of my live streams. I'm just gonna take my seatbelt off. It's driving me nuts. Hopefully I don't pitch forward like I'm not supposed to. Anyway, today I'm going to be reading Take 50 Aspirin and Call Me Dead in the Morning. Chapter 29 from my novel, Was I Ever Normal? For those of you who aren't aware, Was I Ever Normal is my second novel. It was released in August of 2022 and has 8 5-star reviews on Amazon. The novel is for sale at all Barnes & Nobles across the U.S., both in-store and online. It's available as a paperback and ebook. It's also for sale at all Books A Million across the country and hundreds of independent bookstores across the U.S. and internationally. We last left Cassie in third period at school right after she took 50 aspirin in the girls' bathroom. She meant to stay in the girls' bathroom until the aspirin killed her, but then all of those chalky white pills swirling around in her stomach, mixed with the poopy bathroom scent, got to be too much. So she decided to venture out to the library and pretend to be working on research for a history paper. She wasn't expecting the aspirin to make the room spin so bad and her world start fading in and out. After making it into the library, her legs gave out underneath her. She woke up to the librarian taking her pulse and her English teacher calling an ambulance. We'll start reading at the point where the paramedics arrive. And for those of you wondering, this is the book Was I Ever Normal that I am reading from, but I'm reading it off my phone right now. But this is Was I Ever Normal. Hi Vivian, nice to see you. I'll put Was I Ever Normal back here. So we'll start right now. Hang on a second. I'm going to fix my shirt. Was I Ever Normal? A couple of paramedics arrived. They strode quickly into the library, pulling a stretcher behind them. My face burned with embarrassment and shame over the fact that this whole big deal was being made over me. Like I had the night before, I wished that the ground would just swallow me whole. I mentally berated myself for ever leaving the girls' bathroom. The link on Facebook leads to my YouTube page. Oh, that's not good. I hope other people aren't having trouble finding it either. That's not good. Hi, Cassie. Nice to see you. You are a little late, but we just started reading. Yeah, that might be why. But Cassie just got here, so maybe other people will get here too. Usually, I think it just leads to the YouTube page, and then you have to find the one that's streaming. The paramedics knelt down next to me. One of them took my pulse. I was still shivering really hard. I was still crazy dizzy. My breathing was heaving as my lungs pulled in and pushed out the oxygen too quickly to circulate red blood cells all the way through my body. One paramedic clicked an oxygen monitor on my finger, frowned, then slipped some oxygen into my nose and looped it behind my ears, then pulled it tight under my chin. The EMT was asking the two adults questions about me and what had happened. Most of the words washed over my head, but I heard one of them ask the librarian, "What did you say, Cassie?" Yeah, if you just go to YouTube and find the streaming video, it's easy. I heard the one of them ask the librarian, "Was she incontinent? Did she wet herself?" My face burned with shame at this question. I was relieved when the librarian explained that I had simply spilled water on my shorts. The paramedics put their hands under my arms and lifted me to my feet. They guided me to the stretcher and helped me lie down. "Do you know why this is happening?" asked one of the paramedics, while the other one covered my chest with heart monitor lead stickers that they hooked up to their ambulance's portable heart monitor. A mental image of my mom and dad and their tired faces at the bus stop that morning flashed through my head, followed by a flash of memory of how sad I felt, and I hugged them for what I thought would be the last time ever. Earlier that day flashed through my head recorded videos I'd seen growing up where I held my parents' hands taking my first steps, or fell down and I got picked up so my mommy could give me the get better kiss. Then I stopped crying. My dad chasing me around the house, calling out, "Your teddy bears need you in bed." I wasn't ready to leave them. Before I could change my mind or let the voices interfere, I blurted out the truth. I took a bottle of aspirin. The paramedics just nodded. "How much was in the bottle?" one of them asked. "About 50 pills, I guess." They nodded. I focused my gaze on my hands that were sitting in my lap under the seatbelts. I didn't want to look at either teacher, who would now know I was an emotionally disturbed child. Neither of them said anything. The paramedics wheeled me out of the library and down the empty halls of the school. What, Vivian? Oh no, that's Cassie. I was relieved that nobody was in the halls. In the ambulance, they asked me the usual questions. Started an IV in my arm and hung a bag of IV fluids on their flimsy pole of the ambulance stretcher. Because HSA was 30 minutes away from my house, they took me to a different hospital than the one I was used to, and helped me onto the gurney, then left me in the hands of the ER staff. I felt alone and scared. I was sitting in a gurney in the ER that I had never been in. I was hooked up to an oxygen mask, not just a cannula. I was hooked up to heart, oxygen, and blood pressure monitors. There were now 2 IVs in my arms, and 3 different IV bags going into me. My mom would be so disappointed in me. I was scared she might not even want me anymore. Part of me was so tired of trying to fight and survive in the outside world that I wondered if maybe I should ask to be admitted to the hospital. The other part of me, the more realistic part of me, knew that a hospital visit wouldn't change anything, and that chances were good that a stay in one of those torture units would just intensify my suffering. It seemed like I had no good options left, so instead of thinking or listening to the voices who were trying to convince me to get up, tear out all the intravenous lines, and leave, I lay back in the institutional scented sheets and watched the clear liquid in the different IV bags drip slowly from the drip chamber into the tubing and into my arms. Every time my thoughts became too intense with worries about how my parents would react, my torn feelings about a psych hospital stay, thinking about how I lacked willpower, or other difficult issues, I told myself, I'm not going to think about that right now, and just went back to watching the drops in my IV tubing. My mom came, about after an hour of watching the IV and listening to the beep of my heart monitor and the rush of nurses, doctors, and aides. My mom leaned over to hug me with tiredness in her eyes. I felt relief flood through me when I got no lecture. No, I'm so disappointed in you, Cassie. She just gave me a hug that breathed love and acceptance. How are you doing? She asked me. I looked around at the emergency room and then shrugged. We both knew the answer. A doctor came to talk to us a few minutes later. He came with a nurse that handed me a large cup of gritty, sickly sweet, nauseating charcoal. I choked down the charcoal through tears and waves of nausea, then lay back so the doctor could listen to my heart, lungs, and stomach. Then a team of more doctors and nurses descended on me, hanging IV bags, injecting medications through the multiple IV lines in my arms and hands. After that, I began vomiting non-stop. Some of the nurses held me down on the bed so that the doctors could put a tube down in my mouth, down my throat and esophagus, and into my stomach, where they sucked everything in my stomach. Hang on, guys, sorry. Hang on. I don't know what just happened here. Here we go. Where they sucked everything out of my stomach. An hour later, I was rushed to the pediatric intensive care unit, the PICU. It turned out that aspirin is one of the most dangerous drugs to overdose on. The first 2 weeks in the PICU were a blur. There were nurses constantly in and out of my room. They put me through several rounds of dialysis and a round of plasmapheresis to get my levels out of the danger zone. Once I was considered well enough, they transferred me to the regular pediatric floor. Those 4 days on the regular PD floor felt like floating in limbo. After my 4 days were up, the doctors pronounced me medically cleared and that my condition was stable. I almost laughed at someone referring to myself and using the word stable in the same sentence. Then the pediatric hospitalist told us that we'd have to speak with a crisis worker to find out what the next course of action would be. My mom and I both knew that meant we would have to find out if I needed to be locked up in a psych ward or not. But we just nodded. Talking with the crisis worker was painful. Every one of his words reeked of blame. He told me he didn't think I needed the hospital because I was only trying to manipulate people with my overdoses. He took my mom away from me to speak to her separately. The whole time she was gone, Bellingham was trying to convince me that she wasn't ever going to come back. It got to the point that I actually believed that my mom had left me for good. I think that's when I started crying. I started crying so hard that a nurse came over and yelled at me, telling me they had sick children there that needed rest, and I was disrupting the whole floor. But I was a sick patient too. Why were they being so rough with me? Instead of trying to help calm me down so that I could get some rest. I was too scared to say anything. Her yelling made me feel even more scared, threatened, unloved, uncared for, abandoned, and vulnerable. I tried to stop crying, but the sobs were heaving out too quickly, too violently, and too uncontrollably. Bellingham told me I had to bleed more of the poison out, and then things wouldn't feel this way anymore. I had hit rock bottom of my extreme psychiatric/emotional crisis. Things couldn't get much worse from here. I figured I might as well just listen to Bellingham and try anything that would make me feel better. So I slid my hands under my gown and began digging around in the fresh scabs of the wound I created on my stomach with quilting scissors and pins weeks earlier. The wound started bleeding. It bled through the gown, it bled through the sheets, it bled through the blankets. I watched the blossoming stain of blood appear on the blankets and felt a sense of achievement and satisfaction. Now I was stained on the inside and on the outside. The crisis worker and my mom came back. They both saw the blood. "What did you do now?" the crisis worker asked me. "I peeled the scab," I told him. Through the tears that had returned with his question that stunk of accusation, blame, anger, disgust. "Why?" he asked me. "Do you want to be in the hospital? Is that it?" I thought about that question. I thought about how out of control I felt, digging at my own skin until I bled. I thought about how close I'd come to killing myself in the past. I thought about how low and desperate I'd been feeling. Maybe I did want to be in the hospital. I tried to come up with the right words to say this, but my brain was thinking in fragments again. I couldn't summon words. I could just cry harder, with the fears in my heart and the frustrations in my head. The crisis worker gave me a long, sharp look, then called the nurse over to look at the source of the blood. My wound was still bleeding. You could see a layer of fat tissue underneath the layer of skin. "How did this happen?" asked the nurse. "Scissors and a pin, 2.5 weeks ago. But today I pulled it off. The scab. I picked the scab," I whispered. Now even my words were fragments. My mom sighed. The nurse shook her head. The crisis worker stepped out and then came back in. "We're going to look for a hospital bed for you," he informed me. I felt relief and fear, both at the same time. I cried, harder than I'd ever cried before. The nurses wanted to give me a shot of Ativan to calm me down and shut me up. Luckily, my mom was there to inform them that I was allergic to it, both for our sakes and for theirs. I couldn't stop crying. I cried so much it hurt my head. I cried so much I felt feverish. I was still crying when some more EMTs arrived to bring me to the same hospital I'd been at a year before. It was a whole year later, and I'd come for a full circle. And that is the end of chapter 29 of Was I Ever Normal? And again, this is the book Was I Ever Normal? Any questions, comments, anything? Got me back up over it. No, I never overdosed like that. The only way I would ever be able to overdose is if I crushed up pills and put them through my tube. I never overdosed on aspirin like that. But I did meet kids in the hospital that did overdose on aspirin, and it did really do a lot of damage to them. Aspirin is actually one of the most dangerous drugs to overdose on. And I learned that from Crystal, one of the girls I met at Hampstead Hospital. I'm so glad that you can understand and feel our fear and relief. I did have conflicting feelings about going in and out of the hospital different times, where I would decide if I wanted to tell them the truth about whether I wanted to go in or if I wanted to make it sound like I'd be safe and stay out. And I knew how to convince them I'd be safe and stay out, and I knew how to tell them if I wanted to go in. And sometimes I'd give them differing amounts of information whether I wanted to go in or stay out. But honestly, psych units only ever made me worse. Now I can't go to any psych units because I'm on IV push meds and because I'm on TPN and IV fluids, and I require IV Valium and liquid Dilaudid every 3 hours. I require liquid Dilaudid every 3 hours and IV Valium every 8 hours, and I can't go to the hospital. But what happens is if I ever require a psychiatric hospitalization, which hasn't happened yet because I haven't required one in years. I haven't required a psychiatric hospitalization since 2014. But if I did need one, I would go to Mass General, and then they would admit me to a medical floor. At that point, I would be seen by psychiatrists on the medical floor and have someone sit with me and make sure I didn't leave. Yeah, it is really good. I got put on Clozaril back in 2012, and it changed my life completely. Made me 100% turnaround from how I was before. But then the Clozaril gave me a granulocytosis, which is a really bad side effect that can come with it, which is why they test your blood once a week when you're on Clozaril. They test for that issue, and it happened to me, so I had to be switched. Luckily, my nurse practitioner that was my psychiatrist at the time had a brother with schizoaffective disorder like me, and he'd had the same issue I was having at the time, where he was on Clozaril and then got granulocytosis. So she knew about the sister drug to Clozaril, loxapine, which helped her brother immensely when he couldn't be on Clozaril anymore. So she put me on loxapine. Ever since I've been on loxapine, I've been doing really well. I did have a recent increase from 70 twice a day to 70 in the morning and 80 at night, because I was hearing children laughing and talking in the other room in the middle of the night, and it was really bothering me, and it was hallucinations. So she upped me to 80 at night, and ever since then, the children talking and laughing went away. So that was really good. That was a relief. Any other questions? Oh, but the part about cutting the stomach thing, that part was true. I actually did cut off a piece of my stomach with quilting scissors and a pin. Hang on, sorry about that, guys. Yeah, me too. Psychologically, I'm a lot more stable than I used to be. Thanks, Kathy. You're so sweet. Yeah, I've been doing a lot better psychologically. I've been pretty stable. I get really bad anxiety. Every once in a while I get some depression, but I use mindfulness a lot. And the mindfulness is what helps me with the depression. I'm not on any antidepressants. I'm on a mood stabilizer called Topamax. And I'm on loxapine for the hallucinations. And then I'm on Cogentin to prevent movement side effects from the loxapine. And those are the only psych meds I'm on, and I do really well on them. Yeah, isn't mindfulness great, Vivian? It really helps me a lot. I'm actually reading a book right now by Thich Nhat Hanh called The Art of Communicating, and it talks a lot about mindfulness. I love Thich Nhat Hanh. I actually did a video about Thich Nhat Hanh. He's my teacher too, Vivian. Yeah, he's amazing. He's really amazing. I love to read his books. I'm starting to get really bad urgency. I think I'm going to need a PRN and a Valium. I have a UTI. I'm waiting on the culture results. We have to bring it to the lab, so I think I got to get going. Me too. I got to get going for now. I got to make sure my urine culture gets brought to the lab. But thanks, guys. Love y'all. Bye.